welcome back to my channel, and if you're new, then a little introduction. This is a place to share stories, adventures, and everything I wish I had known before embarking on them. My name is Drina, and you're watching from Fiji to here. Every year, we like to sit down and review the happenings of the year. The good, the bad, the ugly, things we changed, things we are impressed with, all that jazz. And you're probably thinking to yourself, Drina, we're like halfway through January already.
Editing Drina here. We're actually at the end of January. More on that later.
So yes, we are extremely behind in video editing. Just have a look at 2021. And like most people, I think we all started 2021 with high hopes that life would be returning to normal, which we now know just wasn't the case. So let's dive in. Starting with January. We weren't completely oblivious to the current situation of the pandemic, and we knew that it wasn't feasible for my family, who all live in Ontario, to make the trek out to Halifax, quarantine for 2 weeks, just to meet my daughter Elisa for a short period of time before they had to head back to Ontario with all of the restrictions in place and whatnot. We are also somewhat frugal and didn't want to be paying for an apartment that we weren't living in. So we decided that it would be a great idea for all three of us, me, Dahlia, and Elisa, to move in with my parents in Ontario, so that we could spend more time with our Canadian family despite different travel restrictions that were in place. Thankfully, we weren't alone in the whole packing and moving process. We did have some incredible friends in Halifax help us get all of our belongings together, as well as my parents drove out from Ontario to pick us up and help us drive back to Ontario. Which it was my dad's first time meeting Elisa because he wasn't able to be there for the birth. Not the birth, but be in Halifax right after she was born. And we also didn't anticipate when making all these plans that I wouldn't be able to drive due to having an emergency C-section. So it helped a lot to have both my parents able to kind of tag team with drivers. Looking back, I don't think we gave ourselves nearly enough credit or even processed how big of a task that was. So on top of being first-time parents with a 5-week-old, I was recovering from a major surgery. We were completely sleep deprived and learning to breastfeed and just survive through that newborn stage. We also just said oh yeah, let's pack up our entire apartment and lives and move across the country. Which takes us into February. We settled in at my parents' place, and with the new month came an extension of the lockdown and COVID restrictions, seeing as my parents live in the Greater Toronto area. We did make a wellness car visit to go see my brother, and he kind of met Elisa through the window. Not really met, I guess. Saw her through the car window. But ultimately, this month spent a lot of time inside. Thankfully, my family members weren't laid off due to the pandemic, which was great financially speaking and just kind of stability-wise. But that meant that I spent a lot of alone time with Elisa, just the two of us. Oh, push. This was also the month that she first rolled over.
You did it!
March came and we had high hopes for the summer. Either that or just being up in the middle of the night feeding led to some online shopping. Maybe a bit of both. As I'm sure you can imagine, all the time indoors with not many places to go, we were running out of things to do and ways to keep Elisa entertained. She was showing so much strength and all the signs of readiness that we introduced her to some new toys. One of them turning into her first love, the Jolly Jumper. Moving into April, for the first time since moving to Ontario due to the COVID restrictions, we actually went on a road trip to go meet my sister and Elisa's Auntie Vero. We actually ended up bringing her back with us to celebrate Easter at my parents' house as a family with my brother as well. The nicer weather meant we spent a lot more time outside. As well as the time in the Jolly Jumper, of course. And in fact, later in the month, some restrictions loosened even more, and Elisa was able to meet 2 of her great-grandparents for the first time.
Yes, he is.
Are you having fun?
May hit us, and with Elisa sitting independently, as well as the okay from her doctor and meeting all the other milestones, we started solids, with her first food being avocado. This month, we also celebrated my first Mother's Day, my birthday, and receiving our first COVID vaccines. Near the end of May, COVID restrictions started to lock down again, and my sister decided to move home as well. We soaked in even more sunshine as the weather got nicer, and we even planted a garden. June was just a jam-packed month. We continued with Elisa Solids journey, as well as trying to introduce allergens to rule out any of them before the end of the month. Restrictions eased again, and we jumped on the opportunity to see family again, including another 2 of Elisa's great-grandparents. Oh, and to make everything a little more interesting, Elisa decided to learn to crawl. We received our second COVID vaccines, and as the end of the month approached, we prepared to head out of the country for the first time since the COVID-19 pandemic was called, and the first time in Elisa's entire life. July came, and after getting settled and meeting up with family in Tunis, as well as a play date or 2 for Elisa, we packed our bags and headed out to La Chapelle to spend a week on the coast. We have a whole series that covers our time in La Chapelle that's already been released, so I'll link it here if you want to check that out. This included Elisa's first time swimming in the Mediterranean Sea as well. We headed back to the city to get organized, repack, and for Elisa to learn how to pull herself to stand, just in time to head to Hammamet for 2 weeks. It was here that Elisa also got to celebrate her first Eid with her Tunisian family. This series is in the process of being edited and will be the first to be released this year. So everything you're going to see is a bit of a sneak peek. In fact, everything in the video from here on out is a bit of a sneak peek, as this is how far behind we are in editing. As the summer continued into August, so did our time in Tunisia, and this month we actually drove down the coast to Jerba, which is known as the Island of Dreams. We spent an incredible 10 days there. Again, a whole other mini-series that covers that. With only a few weeks left, we made sure to take Elisa to Sidi Bou Said and soaked in every minute with family before returning to Canada. And of course, we couldn't leave without celebrating Elisa's calcouche, which is the first tooth party since the tooth had finally popped through. Okay, September. I feel like September was like June, but on steroids. We safely and gratefully made it back to Canada and then spent 2 weeks planning our next steps. This is when we found a place in Montreal, packed up our lives again, and said our goodbyes to all the Ontario family and friends. Bye! Bye-bye! As we headed out to our new home in October, Elisa got to meet Ashley for the first time. She also celebrated her first Halloween, although it poured rain and she slept in a stroller through most of it. November was all about making a house a home. As we got settled in Montreal, we dug into some pretty big projects that had been long awaited. So Elisa finally got a nursery, although it's more like a toddler room now, but we finally got to design it and put it together and whatnot. If you'd like a video on that, just let me know in the comments below. To fit in perfectly with her new toddler room, Elisa started walking this month. Coming from a studio apartment, downsizing to a bedroom in my parents' house, and then upsizing to a 2-bedroom apartment meant we had a lot of furniture to purchase. And purchasing also meant putting together. So November was pretty much spent putting together IKEA furniture and filling out paperwork that's involved when you move provinces or move in general. So like licenses, health cards, all that jazz. And that takes us to the final month of a very busy year, December. We approached December with open arms as we welcomed friends and family for Elisa's first birthday, which went down with a smash. This led into our first mommy-daughter trip as we headed to my parents' house in Ontario for pre-Christmas, and then made it back to Montreal for Christmas Day itself, before packing up and heading out to New Brunswick for a very special wedding. Honestly, just looking back at the year in review makes me tired. If that's not explanation enough for why we are so behind on editing, then subscribe, because in 2 weeks' time we will be coming out with an update video, kind of what to expect, where we've been, all that jazz. And if you completely understand and you're thinking, wow, you're crazy, how did you survive 2021? We'd love to have you subscribe because you sound like our kind of people and we'd love to get to know you better. Thank you guys so much for watching, and remember, life is what happens between the plans that you make. Bye guys.